So we have looked at a lot of important concepts like variables, operators, functions, strings, arrays, lists, errors and exceptions till now. These are the building blocks that will help us write more complex programs. But now, let's add one more block to this set. Now this block is known as objects and classes, and it is an important concept in Java as well. Classes and objects are a part of another huge concept called Object-Oriented Programming or OOP. So, before we understand what classes and objects are, let's understand what OOP is. Well, OOP is a way of organizing and structuring our code. This organizing is done using objects, hence the name Object-Oriented Programming. Now let's move on to classes and objects. So let's start with objects first. What is this? A Dell laptop, right? And this is a MacBook. Can we also say that these are objects? Yes, they are, right? So, we can say that in the real world around us, objects are entities that have a state and behavior. Now, what do we mean by state and behavior? So, the state of an object is the property of an object. For example, the property of this Dell laptop is that it has a screen, and so does this MacBook. Also, we can say that they both have a keyboard and earphone slots. So these are the properties of these two objects. Next, the behavior of these two laptops is that they are used to connect to the internet and they can both be used to write documents or make PPTs, etc. Now both these objects are laptops, right? So, we can say that they belong to the class called laptop. What could be the other objects of this class? Well, it can be an HP laptop, a Lenovo laptop, or an MSI laptop. Let's look at another example of classes and objects. So, let's say the class is dog. What objects can this class have? It can have all the breeds of dogs like German Shepherds, Pit Bulls, Labradors, or even Siberian Huskies. What could be the state and behavior of these dogs? The state would be a tail, 4 legs, fur, etc. And behavior would be eat, sleep, bark, wag their tail, etc. Now if you see here, the state and behavior for all the objects of a class are common, right? Of course, they can be different in the sense that the color of the fur can be different for different objects, or the kind of food they eat can be different. But the fact that all these objects eat food and have fur will remain common. So, we can generalize the concept of classes and objects and say that classes are the blueprint or template for creating objects. And objects can be called as an instance of a class. Remember these terms well. They will come in handy later. So that was about the concept of classes and objects. In the next video, we will learn how to create objects and classes in our programs. Now before we open our IDE and create classes and objects, let's look at some conventions that are used to create classes. So we create a class by using the keyword class before the name of the class. This is similar to how we create functions by using the keyword fun before the name of the function. Next, the name of the class starts with a capital letter. This is opposite to creating functions and variables, since function and variable names start with a small letter. Now, let's open the IDE and create a class. First, to create a class, right-click on the SRC folder on the left panel. From the options, select New and then select Kotlin file/class. A dialog box will appear. Write the name of the class here. We are writing the name as dog right now. And from this drop-down, select Class. Click OK. Now as you can see, a new class called dog is created for us. It has the keyword class and the name of the class starts with a capital letter. Inside these curly braces, we will write the body of this class. So let's start with writing the state or properties of this class. We will write it using variables. So we define 3 var-type variables called breed, color, and age. Then we put a colon and give the data types for these variables. The data type for breed and color will be string and for age will be integer. Now if you see, the IDE has underlined them in red, telling us that there is an error here. What do you think could be the error? Well, if you remember, we always initialize our variables while declaring them, right? So let's initialize these 3 variables with some value. This is how we do it. Now let's add behaviors for this class. Behaviors are nothing but functions that the members or objects of a class can perform, right? So we add functions to this class. Let's create 2 functions here called eat and bark. And we can have print statements inside them. So for eat, we can write $sign and breed s eat food. And for bark, we can write $sign breed s bark. So for eat, we can write this. And for bark, we can write this. Do you remember what these $signs are and why we have used them? Yes, the $signs are string templates and we use them to make the print statement print the value of a variable. If we do not use the string template, the print statement will print the word breed instead of printing the value of breed, which in this case is Labrador. Now these functions in a class are also known as member functions. So we have created the definition of the class dog. Now let's try and run this class and see the output. But wait, we are not getting the run option here. Can you think why? Well, if you remember, we told you that only things that are either written inside or are called inside the main function give an output. So let's write the main function. So we write the main function outside this class. Now, when we wrote functions outside the main functions earlier, we called those functions inside the main function to execute them, right? But for classes, we need to create objects of this class inside the main function. So we create an object like this. We declare a val or var variable, put an equal to sign, and then write the name of the class with parentheses. This name that we have given to this variable is the name of the object we have created for the class dog. Now, we can simply call these 2 functions inside the main class. We call the functions by writing the name of the object of the class, then we put the dot operator, and then the name of the function like this with parentheses. Now let's run this main function and see the output. Yes, we get the results. Now, we can also give different values to these property variables here. So we can write the object name, the dot operator, and then the property name that we had used here. And we give new values to these variables. Now if you run this program, you will see that the name of the breed changed to this breed that we had mentioned here. We can also write a separate print statement for this in this main function like this. Now, let's run the program and see the output. So, we get all three print statements. The values of variables are the ones we declared in the main function. So, we have created classes and objects. But this is not how developers do it. There is a more efficient way of creating classes and objects, and that is by the use of constructors. We will learn about them in the next video, but before that, why don't you take a small quiz and see how much you have understood? So, now let's see what is a constructor. A constructor is a special kind of member function that is used to initialize the state or properties of the newly created objects of a class. The constructor is written inside the class, but it gets invoked when you create an instance of a class, that is, its objects. So constructors are basically required to create objects of a class. And every class must always have a constructor. If a class does not have a constructor, then the compiler creates a default constructor for that class. So now let's go back to this class and its objects that we created. Now do you remember when we were declaring these variables, it showed an error, and to remove that error, we initialized them with some initial values because that was the only way we knew how to remove the error, right? Well, in reality, if you look at the concept of classes and objects, we had established in the beginning that classes are just a blueprint based on which we create objects, right? So this would mean that we should ideally not give any values to these properties inside the class. These values should be given only to different objects that we will create based on this class. Now, constructors help us remove this initialization from here. There are two types of constructors, primary constructor and secondary constructors. Every class can have only one primary constructor, but can have multiple secondary constructors. Now, let's learn about primary constructors. So, a primary constructor is part of the class definition. That is, it is part of this line. It is nothing but the constructor variables that a class needs to have. So this is how we will write the primary constructor for this class. We write the keyword constructor and then the variables are mentioned inside these parentheses. And now we will remove these initial values from the class. We can also remove this keyword constructor from here. So if you see, we have used the same variable names at two places. Well, these are known as the constructor variables and these are known as the member variables or local variables of a class. So when we will give values to the properties on creating objects, those values will actually be stored in the constructor variables, which in turn need to be stored inside the member variables. But this means that we will have to tell the compiler that the member variables are equal to the constructor variables, right? To equate these two, we need to write some code. Now the primary constructor cannot have any code inside it. So we use the initialization block to write code for the primary constructor. To create this initialization block inside the class, we write the keyword init and write the open and close braces. Now inside this block body, we write the keyword this, use the dot operator and then write the variable name of the member variable, equal to sign and then the corresponding name of the constructor variable. Now, why do we use the this keyword here? Well, that's because it is used to differentiate between the member variables and the constructor variables. Now, let's do the same for all these three variables. So now, the values passed when we will create objects will be assigned to the constructor variables, which in turn will be assigned to the member variables of the class. Remember, according to the convention, the names of member variables and constructor variables must always be the same. Also, the LHS here is the member variables and the RHS is the constructor variables. Now, we see that these variable names are getting used 3 times. And knowing Kotlin, we know that there will be some method to reduce this code further to avoid redundancy. Let's see if the IDE suggests us something in this regard. So if you see here, a gray line appears below this variable name. Let's hover over it and see. So the IDE says that can be joined with assignment. We know that this is the part where assignment is happening, which means that we can remove this init block. All we need to do is place our cursor on this line where the error appears and hit Alt plus Enter. The IDE gives us many suggestions. We need to click on this Join Declaration and Assignment option. Now, if you see, the IDE has shortened the code for us and joined the two. Let's do it for all the three variables. But the variables are still highlighted in yellow. Let's hover over it again and see what it says. The message is that property is explicitly assigned to parameter breed can be directly declared in constructor. Again, let's hit Alt plus Enter to see how we can do it. Now let's click on Move to Constructor from the options that appear. Let's do it for all the member variables. Wow, the code really got shortened now. So if you see this and this code, we see how easily Kotlin lets us remove the boilerplate code and shortens the code for us. Now let's create the objects for this class. All we need to do is that we need to pass the values for the variables here within parentheses while creating the objects of the class. We do this for all three variables, separating them by commas. Let's create two objects. We will need to pass values both to times and will also have to call the member functions at both times. Now let's run this code and see the output. Yes, we get the output for both the objects that we created. So that was all about primary constructors. We will look at secondary constructors in the next video. So we have looked at the primary constructors till now. Now let us look at secondary constructors. We will look at them in two steps. First, we will look at a class that has only secondary constructor and no primary constructor. And second, we will see a class where both primary and secondary constructors exist together. Let's look at this part first. So we will go back to our IDE and clear out this class first. Now let's declare the variables again. Then we write the keyword constructor, and inside parentheses we will write the variables along with their data types, just like we did for primary constructors. Then we create the body by using curly braces, and using the this keyword like we had done before, we will join the member variables to the constructor variables. It's very similar to how we had created the primary constructor before the code was shortened. Just that we do not need to use the init block here since the secondary constructor can have its own body. So that is how we create a class which has only secondary constructors. Now let's look at the second case where both primary and secondary constructors can be used together. So let's create a primary constructor first. Now since these variables are already there in the primary constructor, why do we need another constructor? Well, sometimes we may want to have some other properties in a different constructor. So let's declare a variable called name for our secondary constructor. As we had done in the previous case, whenever we want to have a secondary constructor, we need to declare the variables and then create the constructor body. So we use the keyword constructor, and then inside these parentheses, we will have to pass the constructor variables for both the primary and the secondary constructors. We pass the primary constructor variables, and then here we have passed the variable name. Then we put a colon. Then we call all the primary constructor variables in the secondary constructor using the this keyword. Then we use the curly braces to create the constructor body. And like we had done before, we use the this keyword to assign the value of constructor variables to member variables. This part of the constructor declaration tells the compiler that these variables have already been initialized in the primary constructor and hence they do not need to add them to the secondary constructor. Now let's go to our main function and create two objects, one which uses only primary constructor and another which uses both primary and secondary constructors. Now, secondary constructors are not used much in Kotlin. They are used only when we need to initialize a class in multiple ways, which is very rare. So, you need not remember all of it by heart. The reason for teaching you this was to give you a wholesome knowledge about constructors. Click Next whenever you are ready. Now let's say we want to create a list of restaurants and add all the restaurants in the city to this list. Now creating such a list can be a daunting task since all these restaurants will have a name, rating and cost per person. Now this task can be simplified by the use of classes and objects. So let us look at the problem statement. Create a class called restaurants. This class will have three properties: name, rating and cost for one. Create 5 objects of this class. Print out all the values of these objects. Let's see how we can do this. So we go to our IDE and create a new class called restaurants. Now let's create 3 constructor variables which will be the properties of this class. Variable name will have a string data type. Variable rating will have decimal values, so it will have a double data type. And cost for one will have integer data type. Now since this class has no function, we do not need these curly braces and we can remove them. Let's create our main function now. But this time we will create it in a separate file. Now let's create 5 objects for the class we created and pass the values in the parentheses. Done. Now let's print the objects using the print statements. Let's look at the output. Uh-oh, something went wrong. We did not get the values that we had passed in the objects, but some random string. What could have gone wrong? We created the class and objects correctly for sure, since we have done this before. Which means that there must be something wrong with these print statements, right? Yes. So actually, when the compiler runs programs with objects, it creates some names of its own to refer to these objects. If you want to print the data that is passed in these objects, you will have to convert the class to a data class. We'll see what a data class is in just a minute. But first, let's complete this problem statement. So to convert this class to a data class, all we need to do is add the word data here before the keyword class. Now let's run the program again. Yes, we get the values we have passed for each restaurant object. So, right now we had only 5 objects, but in real-life applications, this list can be for hundreds or even thousands of restaurants, right? We will obviously have to pass data for each, which means that we cannot avoid creating objects for each. But can we reduce the code for printing this data? Yes, and if you think hard, you'll know the answer yourself. We can use loops for it, right? So let's use the for loop here. We write the keyword for, then inside these parentheses we write the iterator, let's say res. Now let's say this loop will run how can we write the iteration statement here? It is no standard increment for numbers that we want. These are all independent objects. So, how can we convert these objects into something that can help us iterate through it one by one? Take 5 seconds to think. Well, we can make a list of these objects, can't we? Yes, we absolutely can. So let's create a mutable list so that we can add more objects if we want. We write the keyword var, then we give a name to the list, let's say restaurant list, put the equal to sign, write mutable list of and these parentheses after it. Now within these parentheses, we will pass all the objects that we want to store in this list. Let's store 3 right now. And let's use the add function to add the other 2. We could have mentioned all 5 here itself, but we did this to help you revise the concept of adding elements to a list. Now our class is a data class, right? So if we print the list, it should give the data of all the objects. Let's use the print statement and pass the list name inside these parentheses. Now let's look at the output. Yes, we get the data of all the 5 restaurants. But we get it all in a line. How can we get them all printed separately? Well, you remember we had started using the for loop and then left it midway. We can use the for loop now to iterate through a list, right? Let's do it. For res in restaurant list, we can print res. This will iterate through each of the elements of the list one by one and print out the values of each object. Now let's run this code. Yes, we get the output in different lines for each object. So you see how using lists and loops helped us shorten this code, and we did not have to print each object's data individually. So we have completed our problem statement in an effective way. Now let's go back to one thing that we left off midway, and that is data classes. So what is a data class? Well, a data class is just like a regular class that holds some data. Now when we will develop Android applications, a lot of times we will need classes that will not really perform any function, but will hold a lot of data. For such cases, we convert our normal classes into data classes. As you saw in this video, data classes help the compiler deal with data inside the objects and not just the objects' names. So that was all for this video. Click next to learn more about data classes. So we have understood that data classes are very important if we want to deal with the real data that we have passed in the objects. Now let's see if we can compare objects using data classes. So let's say we create 2 objects with the same values and we want to compare them. Let's write the program for this. So here we have created another object whose values are the same as of this object. Now, we can simply use the if statement to compare these two. So we write, if res4 is double equal to res6, then print same, else print different. Now let's look at the output. Yes, we get the correct answer. Now, imagine if we did not have data classes. So let's remove the word data from this class, thus converting it into a normal class. And now let's run this program. If you see, we get the answer as different. Why? Because we know that for normal classes, the compiler performs operations on the objects rather than the data stored in the objects. Let's print these two same objects for a normal class. If you see, despite the fact that they have the same data, the objects are different. Hence, the comparison operator gave us the wrong answer. So, hopefully now you have understood the importance of having data classes. If we did not have them, we would have to follow a very lengthy process to compare the values of each object or to perform many such operations. Now, to end this topic, let's look at some important points for data classes. Data classes are used to store data. They help us perform operations directly on the data stored in the objects of a class. They help us in omitting redundant code. A primary constructor of a data class must always have at least one parameter. We will be using a lot of data classes when we get to creating our Android application. So make sure you understand them well. Click next to take the quiz.